So you guys might recall a couple of years ago, I did a review on the Laguna Driftmaster fence system. Well, hello there. It is an awesome upgrade for a bandsaw. The problem was they pretty much discontinued it literally the week that I released that video. That was unfortunate, but this thing, as awesome as it is, it was not without its problems. After installation, now I've had mine for a couple of years, it kind of starts to make noises. It rubs a little bit hard. It can be a little bit difficult to keep perfectly calibrated. And if you recall from that first installation video, it's a pain in the butt to install. The system they employed, the universal aspect of it, was just a giant pain in the butt to calibrate, install, and get it running smoothly. So since then, I heard rumors that they actually came out with a new one. And I think that's fantastic because I love the product. I just think it had some flaws. So I am super interested, very stoked to see what is going on inside this box so we can actually put the new one on this saw and see how it performs. Disclosure time. This fence was sent to me for free by Beaver Industrial Supply. They didn't pay for this review, and they have no input on the results. I'm now part of their affiliate program, so if you use my link to purchase this product, I make a few bucks, and you get the warm and fuzzies knowing that you helped us out. Like Bartles and James said, thanks for your support. So I'm actually really pleased to see there's not that many parts. That was one of my gripes before. There were so many parts and pieces, and quite honestly, Laguna's instructions at the time were just flat out terrible. I really did not like them. They were unclear, very difficult to see what was going on in the photos. So hopefully we just won't have that kind of issue here. I've yet to crack the manual. I got it right here, and I will be looking through it first before I embark on the installation. And hopefully things will be a little bit better. But first, I gotta show you guys this. Look at the size of this fence. Hold on, let's go over to the other one. The old fence is about 4 inches. Look at this thing. This one, 7 1/4. Oh, that's great. So the assembly is pretty straightforward. Attach the knob, slide the fence onto the hooch, and Bob's your uncle. This thing is the bracket that attaches to the table, but first gotta remove the old fence. They provide bolt sets for various saw brands, but no mention of my SCM saw, so I'll just use the biggest bolts available. Word of warning, if you don't have holes in the side of your table, you might need to make some. Now you want to get the horizontal part of the bracket on the same plane as the tabletop, so I'm just checking it with an adjustable square and smacking it around until it's perfect. The aluminum rail then gets bolted to the bracket. That's a good shot, by the way, isn't it? I don't normally get those that good. They're hard to do. And this little doojobby is a stop that you can use for returning to a particular measurement. As you can see, the fence has an uneven gap, and that's remarkably easy to adjust out by turning this little nylon screw. That's good enough for YouTube. Now we check the fence to make sure that it's square to the table. It's not, but it's close. Fortunately, that's an easy adjustment with 2 set screws on the back side of the fence. Dang! That's good! All right, so the installation is done, and while I hesitate to kind of split my review into 2 sections here, I do want to talk a little bit about the installation because that is a huge factor. Installation and calibration. This was so easy. There's just so few parts. I allotted a number of hours today to do this, and it only took maybe 45 minutes. And honestly, if you aren't filming this and documenting it, it's probably going to take you maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And I don't mean just to get it on the saw. I mean to have it dialed in and ready to go. The last one was just, it was a nightmare to install. There was no clarity in the manual, had all kinds of problems. This one suffers from none of that. So I'm going to see how this thing performs, absolutely, and we'll talk about that afterwards. But in terms of the installation, the build quality, what you expect to get for this kind of money, and then just the ease of installation and getting this Laguna branded product onto an SCM saw, it was no problem. This was fantastic. I'm super stoked, and I hope that I continue to be excited when I see this thing in use. All right, let's do it. First up, we need to set the drift. If the blade is naturally cutting at a bit of an angle, this method should show it. I draw a line down a jointed and plain piece of scrap and basically cut that line about halfway down the length of the board. By this time, the board should reflect the drift angle, so I use a pencil to draw the angle onto the table. Now I can make the simple adjustments on the Driftmaster to make the fence parallel to the blade direction. By the way, this is why the Driftmaster is called the Driftmaster, because I'm like totally mastering that drift. So my primary use for this saw is resawing. Whether it's cutting down big pieces of lumber or making veneer, this saw won't be used much for curved work. So I spent a few days making veneer cuts. And more veneer cuts. And then a few more veneer cuts. I mean, at a certain point, I think I had enough info to stop, but I just couldn't. Please send help. I think I have a problem. My daughter Ava asked me for a vanity, and I decided to make one out of cherry with some of the features that she asked for.
Well, I kind of want the mirror to open and shut, and I like bright colors.
So we've got plenty of storage here, 2 big drawers. We've got 2 little drawers on the desktop, a couple of shelves, and then of course, in here, we have another shelf, some extra storage, and a lighted mirror.
Yeah.
Light it up! In this course, we'll cover a lot of woodworking techniques, including large panels, tapered legs, dowel joinery, wooden drawer slides, and dovetails everywhere. We'll also cover how to make continuous grain drawer fronts. Now, for the first time ever, we're launching a guild course for only $29. Hours of video instruction, PDF and SketchUp plans, and all the benefits of guild membership for only 29 bucks. I must be nuts. If you want to get nuts too, head over to thewoodwhispererguild.com and sign up for the pre-order. The course launches on September 13th. All right, I got my coffee, I got my notes. Let's review a fence. All right, so I've spent the last several days with this bandsaw fence. I've done all kinds of resawing in different materials, softwoods, hardwoods. I did 2 different methods of resaws, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I also changed my blade out because my old blade was getting dull. I was seeing results I didn't like, had nothing to do with the fence, but I wanted to make sure that that wasn't even a factor. So now I have another blade in here that's nice and sharp. So in that time, I've learned quite a bit. There's good news and there's bad news. So let's start with the good. So first of all, the whole unit is incredibly light. Compared to the last one, I weighed some of the other parts, and I think I'm at about roughly 33 pounds on the other unit. Now, I don't know exactly what this one is, but it is so much lighter. As a individual person trying to install this by myself, it was just so much easier. Vastly improved installation process and a much more efficient design, I think, without so much wasted material and wasted weight and heft where you just really don't need it. Another big improvement is in terms of documentation. You might remember in my last review, I really didn't like the manual. It was just terrible. The fact that they included a CD with the package and didn't have any modern videos on the installation was real problematic. None of that is happening here. This manual is very clear, it's concise, it doesn't give you information you don't need, it's not confusing at all, and they actually do have an installation video on their website that is fantastic in running you through this entire installation process. The good news is, I didn't even need it. I watched it after I was done and may have learned a thing or two that I could have done better, but ultimately I didn't actually need it to do the installation. A real big improvement is this linear bearing guide. When this thing needs to move, it's just an absolute pleasure to slide back and forth. And then when you need to lock it down, you could lock it down. On the previous model, it was just like, every time you wanted to move that thing, it was like grinding over that lead screw. This one is just so nice, single-handed operation. Absolutely love this guide. Of course, the fence itself is a huge improvement. We have an increased height here, which supports taller workpieces at 7¼ inches, and then the additional T-tracks. Now, I know they have a flip stop that can be used with this. I don't have that right now, but it looks like a pretty standard T-slot, 2 of them actually, so you would be able to put all kinds of accessories, maybe feather boards, hold downs, who knows, all kinds of stuff. But it's nice to just have that option. And overall, we just have a general increase in ergonomics and just usability. It just is more elegantly designed. The positioning of the tools, the knobs that we're gonna have to turn and interact with, it's just better. In the last version, there was a little turn knob and you could either mount it at the front or you can mount it at the back. And with this particular saw, the way it worked out, that was not a great decision either way. So I wound up mounting it in the front, but it was still one of those things you're gonna do a hip check on quite often. This one just kind of stays out of the way. The knobs, the buttons, the things you have to interact with are now color-coded in a way that if the manufacturer refers to the gray handle or they refer to the red tab, you know what they're talking about. Just makes a whole lot more sense. The other thing, which may just be specific to my SCM saw, but in the last installation, something I didn't realize until after the fact was that I couldn't fully open my doors. So when you need to do maintenance on your bandsaw, you gotta open up these doors, get access to the wheels, and that's even for blade changes and things like that. But this system was so big and clunky, it hung down too far, and I couldn't open the door. Thankfully, the doors now just barely grazed that wheel. Look at that. But I've got complete clearance and full access to the interior of the saw. You want me to record you making lemonade?
I got the ice ready and the lemonade. First I grabbed some water and then 3 scoops of lemonade.
3 scoops in that tiny amount of water?
You can have more water, you know.
I don't want to criticize. You are the chef.
I am the chef. I'm gonna mix it up. And then I put the ice in. I'm gonna mix it up some more. Then voila, lemonade.
Yeah, 3 would have been too much. So of course, it can't be all rainbows and butterflies. You guys know me, I'm pretty nitpicky about things like this, and it's my job to show you the flaws as well. So let's get into the bad news. So first, there's just a little quirk that I noticed when I was pulling the tab back, disengaging from the teeth, and using that bearing guide to move this thing. I would get it caught up once in a while after I moved it a few times. And that's with this, locking knob loose. So what was actually happening was the nut that's in that T-track, if you had a little bit of back and forth motion there, it would wind up getting a little bit like tweaked to the side, just enough that friction would cause the nut to grab and it would stop this like beautiful smooth motion and make it kind of stutter a little bit. And that was no bueno. So that was an easy fix. All I had to do was add a little bit of wax and dry lube into the T-slot, and now super smooth. So that might be just a maintenance thing that over time you're going to want to re-wax that. Now, another thing I noticed was that there's a little bit of a quirk with the fence squareness, that is being perpendicular to the table surface. So I followed the instructions, I set up the fence nice and square, but then I found that every time I used the gray knob to lock the carriage down, it would push the fence, back at the top. And then looking at the arrangement here, it kind of makes sense that that would happen. We've got a bolt going through here and it's only on the left side, engaging with a nut in this T-track. So every time you tighten it down, you're kind of compressing this side together, leaving the right side to float. So how do you get around that? Well, I realized a couple of things, or at least talking to a rep at Laguna informed me of a few things. One is that when you set the fence squareness, do it when you are at your full tightness, whatever that is, right? And this is a gradient here. Because what I found was as I got a little bit tight, I saw a little daylight at the top. A little tighter, I see more daylight. I push a little further, more daylight, right? So there's a whole gradient of pressure that we could apply to cause that to move. So how do we make that consistent? Well, the way I decided to do it is to utilize the other hardware that's here as a stop. So I know every time to get back to that same level of tightness, I have to rotate this knob until I make contact with this other knob. And that's it. It's going to be the same every single time. So I've recalibrated the fence. If I loosen, I'm at a square. If I tighten and I hit that other knob, it squares right up. So this is kind of like at the table saw. When you move your fence at the table saw, you get a little bit of tilt. And then once you tighten it down and you hit that cam on the handle, then everything snaps to and it finds its parallel to the blade position, right? So it's very similar to that. It's a bit of a workaround, but it works, and I've used it, I've tested it. It seems like it's going to be dependable, but I will say that I probably will keep a square around just in case, so I can build more and more confidence over time that each time I lock this thing down, I know for sure I'm going to be square. So let's talk a little bit about the micro adjustment on this one. That's one of the main features. It's honestly one of the main reasons I have this thing on my saw in the first place. Now, the previous model had a lead screw, so it's very tight threads. You're turning the handle a lot to just get a little bit of motion, which means you have very granular control. It's good in some ways, a little bit annoying in other ways, but ultimately it gives you the control you need. On this model, they've opted for more of a rack and pinion gear system, and now we actually move quite fast. Usually you want that down. So look how fast that movement is. I'm going probably 4 or 5 times as quick as I was able to on the previous model, but it's also now a coarser adjustment. So on the last one, you had a handle that had tick marks on it. I think those ticks were each like 0.004, and a full rotation was something like a 1/16 of an inch. On this one, it's way more coarse. We have a full rotation gives us a 1/4 inch, and then you just have to, you sort of have a pretty looking handle, but one that doesn't have tick marks. You can't really, trust it as much, but you're basically going to have to divide a 1/4 inch into like quarters. You say a 1/4 turn, there's my 1/16, another 1/4 turn, there's another 1/16. The other thing is there's backlash in this. So the way that the screw that's attached to this handle interacts with the gears in here, there's just a little bit of backlash. It's almost a 1/4 turn, right? So it go from here to there is where I start to see it grab. Now, the good thing about the backlash is it doesn't really affect very much in operation because most of the time you're advancing. So usually you have a setting and then you're just kind of going a 16th more, a 16th more, a 16th more, and you're advancing forward. You're not often going back and forth, which is where that backlash would kind of bite you in the butt. So that leads me into all of my resawing that I did. And it was a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how this one works compared to the previous one. So you saw me making cuts a bunch of different ways, and I mentioned earlier a couple different types of resaws. One is, let me get a piece of scrap here. One is to take your jointed face, put that against your fence, and then you simply start peeling off your veneer slices from the outside surface. And each time you make a cut, then you turn the handle, you go an 1/8 more, a 16th more, whatever it is, you make your next cut, and you're inching across. In this way, you're never modifying your reference surface. So it's a little bit more efficient that way. But you need a system like this to do that. Otherwise, if you're lining up by eye and measuring with a, with a ruler, it's a little bit trickier to do that. So this allows for that kind of repeatability. The other method would be to say, set the fence for the thickness of the veneer you want, lock that guy in, you don't move that at all, and now you take your jointed surface, you go against the fence, and you make your cut. Well, now you have on your main piece, you've got a rough surface, so you have a choice. Is it smooth enough to just put it back up against the fence and make your next cut, or do you have to go back to the jointer, clean that face up, then come back here for a much more just a tedious process if you do it that way, right? Both methods are valid. Chances are you're probably going to go to a drum sander after this step anyway, so it's just a personal preference, right? I just like the idea that I could do both. And on this one, it's a little trickier on the outside. So I get perfect cuts when I have it like this. I was able to just knock them out. They're all the same thickness, works really, really well. When I'm working on the outside of the workpiece like this, the slop, the backlash, the little bit of slop in the gears, it just makes it a little bit harder. But the one thing that they did that is really going to save me here is the fact that they now have the ruler on this T-track here. So I can actually, instead of counting turns or going, because that's how I was doing it at first, which was giving me kind of not great results. I would go, okay, well, I'm at 12 o'clock. I want to do an 1/8 of an inch cut. I'm going to go to 6 o'clock. And that should give me half of that 1/4 inch, right? An 1/8 of an inch. And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. It was a little bit not really as dependable as the previous version. But when I look at the gauge here, it's actually really easy to see. I'm now going to start to look at that gauge as a relative reference point and decide when I see that carriage on a line and I decide how thick I need to go, that's how I'm going to do it. So it's different than the last one. The lead screw in the last version was just more dependable to kind of blindly make your adjustments. This one, you do have to watch that scale a little bit. So that's why I mean it's a mixed bag. There's some good things about it, but then it also brings some other quirkiness with it. All right, so a little summary. It's like the famous philosopher E. Garrett used to say, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and then you have the facts of life. The trick with this fence is we have to analyze it completely in a vacuum because there's really no competition. The only other competition for this fence is the one that Laguna used to make, the previous generation of the Driftmaster, which was discontinued 2 years ago. When I evaluate this thing, I'm just looking at it as something that brings features that no other fence on the market can bring. And if you need those features, then this is the fence you're going to get. And you're going to have to look past a couple of the little quirks. But ultimately, it is so much better than a previous generation. And I left that on my saw in spite of all of its major quirks. This is a no-brainer for me. This is going to stay on the saw. It's going to do what I need it to do. I just have to change the way I'm used to doing things, do them slightly differently to get the same results that I got before. And then there are just so many usability features on this that are vastly improved over the last generation that I have to give this ultimately a big thumbs up. I think it's a good product. But in terms of telling you if you should buy it, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to lay out the details, lay out the facts, and then you decide if it's worth it for you. So if you like what you see with this fence and you think you might want to pick one up, well, I got good news for you. I could save you a few bucks. We've got a link in the description where you could save 5% when you get this from Beaver Industrial Supply. The cool thing about this company is they're local to me. When I ordered my drum sander, I ordered from them and I didn't realize that they were in St. Louis. So I did a local pickup option and I got a chance to meet the folks there. And that's how we got to talking about possibly working together in the future, which led to this review. And also, you know what they told me? That if you give them a call, and let's say you're buying some big equipment, because they sell a lot of stuff. If you give them a call and mention my name and you're buying some pretty expensive tools, they will probably be able to cut you a better deal than you would be able to get just by going to the website and adding stuff to your cart. So it's amazing. Phone calls actually still work these days. So great folks over there at Beaver Industrial Supply. Check them out. Use that link. And that link is also an affiliate link, which means we get a few bucks if you make the purchase. And that just helps support what we do here at the Wood Whisperer. So I truly appreciate it. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. All right. Let's do it. All right. Go, Mark! So I'll get myself pumped up these days. All right, here we go. It's good times. Oreo, he's a good boy. Not just a good boy, but the best boy. He's the best boy. He's the best boy. You're so pretty now. He's a pretty boy. That's a lot.